Hi, everyone. So I have three coffee themed cards to share with you today. I guess they're coffee and Christmas themed, and we are going to do some really fun techniques involving glitter embossing powder to make these cards. So let's get started. And to start, we are going to start with this coffee bean background 6x6 stamp from Honeybee Stamps. And this is brand new to me, so this is my first time using it. I've cut out a piece of dark brown cardstock by about 6 inches by just 11 and a half. I'm going to put my anti-static powder tool all over the back of it. And now I'm just going to lay my clear stamp right on my work surface, and it's going to stick really nicely to that craft mat that I have, using some Versamark ink to ink the stamp up. I apply the cardstock right over top, just like this. I prefer this with 6x6 stamps to a MISTI. I find I get a better impression doing it this way. And this is what it looks like with the clear embossing powder. Well, actually, that was just with the embossing ink. Now we're going to put the clear embossing powder over it and then heat set it. So I'm just going to shake that clear embossing powder all over, and it's going to give us a raised, glossy texture to our stamp once we heat set it. So I'm just, if I missed any areas, I'll just apply some more embossing powder over it and then shake it off. Now I have my heat gun. I have heated up pretty good before starting so that my paper doesn't warp too much. By that I mean I probably let it just run for about 30 seconds before applying it to the paper. And now I'm just going to move it all over the paper until our embossing powder is set. And you'll know it's set when it gets nice and shiny and it no longer looks white. And my paper's a little warped, so I'll just flip it over and heat set the back of it, and then that makes it kind of come back to flat. Okay, so we only need half of this coffee dye. So I am just going to line up the coffee bean so it appears on one half of the coffee dye. I'm going to cut the entire 2 coffee cups, which makes the coffee shaped card, out of a piece of white cardstock later. But this is going to be the front of the card, so I only need one of the coffee mugs to have the little coffee bean impressions on it. I'm going to line everything up, and then I run it through my die cutting machine. These are large die, so you will need an extra large die cutting machine for it. I use the Spellbinders Platinum Plus. And now I've cut everything, and we can start assembling our coffee cup. And so there's that white card base. So I just used a full sheet of Neenah cardstock to cut it out. And then we have our little coffee bean front. I'm just going to apply some art glitter glue to the back of it. You could use any adhesive for this. This is just what I had handy, so that's what I'm using here. Just going to get that ink or glue all over the back. And then we'll apply it to the front of the card. One benefit of using liquid adhesive is it gives you a quick moment to kind of rearrange your piece if you don't get it on straight the first time, whereas a tape adhesive or score tape, you really just get one shot to get it straight. I put my distress inks on top of it just so that the top panel adheres good to the card base. Now I've cut out 4 lids, and I'm just going to stack them one on top of the other and glue them together. This is to add some dimension to the card. You could put foam tape on the back of it if you don't want to cut out all of these little die cuts, but I just think it looks better to just have them all die cut, because then when you look at the card from the side, it'll just look like the lid. It won't look like there's anything, any tape jutting out from underneath there. So now we're going to assemble the little holder for our coffee cup, and I just die cut 2 of the halves of the cup holder with some black glitter cardstock. I think this is Tonic's black glitter cardstock. I'm going to apply some glue to one side, press it down, just press until it adheres, trying not to get any glue from my fingers on the outside of it. And then I'm just going to do the same on the other side. get some more glue too. So the holidays, I just love getting out all of my glitz and sparkle into my holiday cards. So that's why we're going to be using glitter cardstock. We're going to use glitter embossing powder. We'll use some glossy accents on our cards. We're going to have just lots and lots of sparkly accents. Okay, so now let's put it all together. So I'm just going to apply some glue to the back of the lid, pop it right on top, press down. And then once it is adhered, then for now, that's what it looks like on the inside. You could write your own message or stamp a sentiment. I'm not going to do that for this card. And then apply the holder. I'm going to put one more lid on top just because I got a little bit of a smudge in the center there and I wanted the lid to be just pristine white. So just going to add another one on top of there. So instead of pulling it off and starting over, no harm in just adding one more piece of the die cut over that. Okay, so this is the Pretty Poinsettia stamp set, and this is the stamps that we're going to use to make our focal images for the 3 cards that we are going to make in this video. So I am going to start by inking up all the images with some Memento black ink, which is a Copic friendly ink. I am going to stamp the images using my large Misty onto some Copic Expressive blending card paper, which is my favorite paper for Copic coloring. You could also use Neenah Solar White, 110 pound weight. That's another good alternative. I would not use the 80 pound weight because you might get some bleed between the black Memento ink and your markers if you use that one. Okay, so to start, I'm going to map out where I want all of my highlights to be. So I'm using a YR12 for that. I prefer to have an orangey highlight in my red images instead of just stark white. Next, I'm going to move in and start mapping out the darkest areas on the petals with my R39. This is going to be the second to darkest color we use. We will also use some R89 at the very end to add some really, really deep shadows to just some small parts of the poinsettia flower. And yeah, so I'm just adding this contrast like wherever a leaf overlaps another so that if it's underneath, there would be a little shadow. The edges, I'm putting a shadow on one side, leaving the other side pretty light. Now I'm going in with my R29. This is one of 2 midtones that I'm going to use. And I'm just sort of building out the color from the area where I laid down the darkest color to start. I've been doing a lot of watercoloring lately, and I've noticed that it's had an impact on my Copic coloring. So this is actually the first time I've broke out my Copic markers in maybe about 2 weeks. I think I've been just strictly watercoloring. And what I noticed is my Copic coloring is a lot looser. I don't really follow formulas as much as before. It's more just about like getting different variations of color on each of the leaves just to give interest to the image. So that's one of the things that watercoloring has taught me, just to kind of be a little looser and just really just shoot for that idea of you want there to be different variations in color across your focal image, as opposed to, okay, this is where the light source is coming in, this will be lighter, this will be darker. It's just, you know, more kind of just playing and being loose, I guess. Okay, so for the center, I'm going to use some gold color, so Y13 and Y17. And then for those leaves in the center, I used a little R39. And I have sped this up maybe by about 4 times, I think. So I am not moving this quickly in real life. But because this is a long video in terms of there's a lot of things we need to do to get through the card, I sped up the coloring part a little bit. Okay, so this is what, like I said, where I'm adding that R89 just to a few areas where I want there to be the darkest shadows. And you'll see that's going to start to make the leaves kind of pop off the page a little bit, so that the more dark that you add in small discrete places, it makes the lighter areas of the flower just kind of really, really pop. And then I just keep going over it with my other colors until everything is blended kind of nicely, maintaining that variation in color. We'll move on to the berries next. Just going to add a dot of YR12 in the center. Add a little bit of R39 as well. Sometimes it's just like a tiny little dot on each of the berries. And then we'll take our R29, add a little bit more color. Again, just a dot. And then finally, we'll use a little bit of R24 on some of the berries. And that's it. So our berries are the same color as the poinsettia. Now I'm going to use YG 95 and 97 for these little sprigs of pine, I guess, and for the branches on the berries. Now, what's interesting is now these branches look green, but now watch what happens when we color in the holly. We're going to use some green shades for the holly instead of yellow green. And then when we look at these sprigs that we're coloring now they look green. In a second, they're going to look brown. It's kind of, it's interesting. I wasn't expecting that, but just watch how it happens. So for the holly, we're going to use G43, G46, and G29. They're pretty bright, like between bright and dark green colors. And I just used R43 for the base. R29 is our darkest, and then our G46 is our midtone. Did I say R46? I meant G46 and G29. All right, and again, I'm using that loose like watercolor methodology here on the leaves as well. My goal is just for there to be a variation in color, not really thinking much about where I'm putting the color. And see, now they look green, so now they look brown, so I had to go back and add some green to them just so that all the images match. For the pine cone, I'm going to use some E70, so E71, E73, and then E77. And I'm just, applying the color, maybe the darkest shade towards the bottom of each of the little petals of the pine cone. I know that's not what they're called. I don't remember. Are they called spines? Something. For the roses, we're going to use some warm gray tones. I want it to look like they're white roses. We're also going to glaze them with some really, really light peach and blue-green colors at the end as well. Just applying just a tiny, tiny bit of shading here with the R00, and then a little BG10 as well. And once we add the glitter embossing powder over, all of these images are gonna pop so much. It's really, really pretty. For this bow down here, we're gonna use BG10, some BG34, and then some BG32 for the colors here. So I just have been loving teal and red and green and brown for Christmas colors this year. So most of my cards and different watercolor paintings have been using this color scheme. I just can't get away from it. I'm going to use some BG75 for the darkest areas on the bow, like the little fold underneath, the little areas right next to the knot in the center. And just going to add some W7 or warm gray 7 to the roses just to make the petals on the rose pop a little bit more shading with BG10. And that looks good to me. So now I'm going to move this right over to my Misty. I have not moved the images from the first time, but I did clean them off. This is a trick so that you can be able to emboss exactly over where you lay down your Copic ink. So if you want to do this technique, I would recommend like stamping your images using a Misty, leave the images in the Misty, color, and then come back and then add your clear embossing ink, and then apply your glitter embossing powder. So I'm using Wow Midas Touch Glitter Embossing Powder. This is a great embossing powder for all things Christmas. It's really bright and sparkly, and I'm just going to apply that over top of all the images. I left the poinsettia off for this go around because I hadn't done this before, didn't know how it was going to work, and wanted to make sure I left at least one image in case these other images were going to be unsalvageable. And now I'm just going to take my heat gun, heat set it, and it looks gorgeous. I love it. I especially love those little roses at the bottom. It just gives it that just special pop, I think. And so at this point, I'm convinced I am going to go over the poinsettia as well with my glitter embossing powder. So I will do that in a second. Let's just bask in the beauty of these lovely glitter embossed images. And now I've applied the glitter embossing powder to this poinsettia as well. And now we'll just emboss that. Just look at how that just comes to life and just pops so much. So pretty. So if you are going to Copic color images, definitely do it in these stages. Do not do your embossing first and then color. You can ruin your Copics that way, especially with the glitter embossing powder. It's a little bit harder even than regular embossing powder on your Copic. So you definitely want to emboss, stamp with your ink, color with your ink, and then emboss with your glitter embossing powder at the end. Okay, let's put our cards together. So we have enough focal images for 3 coffee cups. So we're going to start with our first one. So I'm just going to pop up our poinsettia on the little coffee cup holder. I'm going to apply some just tape adhesive to the little holly sprig, apply that flat to the coffee cup holder, and then the same with this other little leaf here, and just attach it like that. Add the sentiment. I've used some, I think, Arctic blue cardstock and just stamped it with black ink. And then just showing you could add a sentiment to the center if you like. Now we're going to move on to our second version. So I used the Wow embossing powder for these coffee beans on the front of it. So it works not just with the Copic images, but it's also really nice with your background stamps as well. I have some holographic cardstock for our coffee cup holder. Going to apply the roses on some foam tape above, and then we're just going to lay these other images flat against the coffee cup holder. So we have another sprig. We have our pine cone. Going to pop that one up as well. Just tuck it in behind the roses, and then we're going to do the same with our little holly leaf. I'm just going to pop it up on the thinnest piece of foam tape and then just stick that in there. And now we're going to attach this Merry and Bright sentiment to the front. These sentiments are all in the Pretty Poinsettia stamp set, and they also have the die cut, so you can die cut out the sentiments as well, which I just love about the honeybee stamp dies. Now, this is one where I put a sentiment in the center, so that's what it looks like if you want to do that. Put that one to the side, and we will use our last one. For this, I'm going to use this Fresh Brewed 6x6 paper pad by Honeybee Stamps. And I just picked 2 of the pattern papers and use those for the card base and then for our little coffee cup holder. I'm going to attach my sentiment to the top. So all the sentiments, I just, because I was making 3 cards, I just did the sentiments all at once, just using one color cardstock. This is a little leftover piece from that coffee bean stamp before, so I thought it'd be nice to just use the little circle die in the coffee cup die set to cut that out. And then this is the bow. Just going to attach that right overhead and then add some little sprigs of berries behind it. And that is going to finish off our card. So these came together pretty quickly after I got through the embossing and the coloring. Just putting them together maybe took me about 10 minutes to put these 3 together. And here they are. So here are our 3 glittery, blingy, Christmassy coffee cards. You could also add a little gift card holder pocket on the inside if you wanted to make these gift cards. Just lots of options with these. This could be a really big gift tag if you like, or it could just be a traditional Christmas card. It's really up to you. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you give these cards a try, and I will see you again soon in the next video.